Okay, so first of all, we've been studying the Sutra on mindful breathing. I am really indebted to for this talk to Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh for pretty much everything I'll be sharing this evening. It's based on a retreat that I did with him in, I believe it was 2006, and it was just a really valuable retreat. This is by no means the extent of understanding on mindful breathing, but it's just a little taste of what the Sutra on mindful breathing is about. We've covered so far the first 8 exercises of 16 exercises, and the first 8 of those exercises, the first 4 are based in the body, and the second 4 are based in feelings. So we've done some exercises, some practices around those two those first 2, what are called the foundations of mindfulness. The third foundation of mindfulness is the mind. And so that's what I'd like to talk about this evening, is the third set of 4 exercises. So these 4 exercises, briefly, the first one is about becoming aware of your mind. And in the process of becoming aware of your mind, also aware of as you're breathing in and out, we're becoming aware of our mind. The second exercise, breathing in and out and gladdening the mind. The third exercise is, as you're focusing on your breathing, concentrating the mind. And the fourth exercise based in the mind is breathing in and out and liberating the mind. So that's a kind of big overview of this third set of 4 exercises on mindful breathing. So I'd like to go into the first exercise, which is becoming aware of mind. So first of all, what do we mean? What do we mean by the mind? When we're talking about mind, there are many ways to talk about mind in the West. In Western psychology talks about mind. Buddhism also talks about mind, and there's multiple maps for viewing the mind in Buddhism. So we'll look at a couple of those maps this evening, or consider a couple of those maps this evening. The first map is in some Buddhist traditions they say that there are 51 mental formations. So if you want to know what our mind looks like, well, there's 51 possibilities for different thoughts. Other schools say there's 45. In either case, there's a lot going on, a lot of thoughts going on in our mind in any given moment. And in this one map of our mind, this one map says that our mind has 6 layers to it. There's 6 layers to our mind, from the most gross level of mind to the more subtle levels of mind. So the first layer is the most kind of gross, unrefined layer of our mind, and the 6th layer is the most subtle. The 6th layer is what we're really getting in touch with when we're practicing mindfulness, or when we're just practicing meditation. We're getting in touch with that 5th and 6th levels. Everybody pretty much everyone universally has this first layer intact. As long as you have all your faculties in place, this first layer, this is what happens in every single mind moment. It's happening for all of us right now. And it consists of what's called the 7 universals. There's 7 things happening in every single mind moment, in our minds, in my mind, in your mind, at this time. This is the very first layer of our mind. And those 7 things are contact, feeling, perception, volition, a certain degree of one-pointedness, mental vitality, and attention. So those 7 things are happening in this very moment. So contact, on a gross level, it's referring to how the mind makes initial contact with its object. So, for example, the hand touches something, and that's contact, or the eye touches something with the sense organ of the eye touches something. That's contact that's made. The mind also makes contact with something. It could be a thought. It could be something in the external world. It could be something in the internal world. Contact is made. And from that contact springs a feeling. A feeling takes place. This is all happening in split seconds. So it's not like in fact, a practice to consider is to go back to that initial contact. Usually what we do is contact with an object of our mind takes place, and we immediately, like in a split second, a whole story blooms in our mind of what's happening. And what we want to do, what practice, what Zazen is doing, is bringing us back to that initial contact. What's actually happening? There's contact taking place here, and there's a feeling that accompanies the contact. Maybe a better word might be a sensation, because feeling indicates that it's positive or negative. But really, what's going on there? There's a sensation that arises with that contact, and that sensation leads to a feeling that's either positive or negative, and that feeling leads to a perception of what's going on. The perception enables us to consider what we should now do. Should we run? Should we fight? Or maybe there's nothing that we need to do. Those are all volitions. They're actions that we take. There's a certain degree in the mind, on the first layer, of focus. It may not be very concentrated like you would find after sitting in Zazen for, say, 30 minutes or like a retreat or something. It may not be very focused like that, but there's a certain degree of focus present. And there's a certain degree of mental vitality. In other words, sustaining focus over multiple mind moments. And there's a certain degree of attention present. And attention in this model means the ability to redirect the mind. So it's attention, focus is like a rudder on a boat. So you can move your attention from one object to the next. And sometimes we get stuck. Our attention gets stuck on one particular object at the expense of all the other things that are moving through our mind. But attention is our ability to actually redirect our mind. So this is all happening in the first layer, whether somebody's a meditator or not. It's happening. This second layer now, going into the second layer, is made up of six different things. The first one is applied thought upon an object. So we begin to think about something that comes into our field of awareness, into our mental field of awareness. There is then sustained thought, holding your attention on that object. There is decision. So you have to make a decision. What am I doing with this particular object of my mind? There's the capacity here for decision. Now, decision is interesting because decision, it's interesting that it's in the second layer of mind, not the first layer. So when we move into the second layer, we're going a little bit deeper into our mind, and the ability to make a decision is held in this second layer of mind. And decision can sometimes be elusive to us. We may not feel like we have the ability sometimes to make a decision. But this is the layer of mind where decision kind of is. It exists. In Western biology, we talk about in neuroscience, decision. The place where decision lives is in our prefrontal cortex, in the kind of the front of our brain. That's where decision lives, and that's an empirical model. You can prod the brain in certain areas, and you find out what part of the brain is in control of certain activities, like making a decision. The Buddha's time didn't have access to the neurobiological information that we have today. So, but this is how the mind is envisioned. The fourth aspect of this second layer is energy. So energy enables us to take interest in the object that's before us. If there's no energy, everything kind of falls apart. If we're not interested in what's in our mind, we're not going to hold our attention there. So there needs to be, and whatever it is that we're paying attention to in this moment or in the next moment, is going to require some degree of energy. Right? It's not something that we're there's some degree of interest in it. It may not be a lot of interest, but interest is there. Also joy, some degree of joy is there. And then the last thing on this second layer is the impulse to act. And this impulse to act is not rooted in the three poisons at this stage. So the three poisons in Buddhism, we talk about greed, hate, and delusion. So at this point, at this layer of our mind, we're not acting yet from a place of the three poisons: greed, hate, or delusion. Okay, we're moving now into a more subtle layer. This is the third layer of mind, and this is called the four unwholesome universals. So when we're not practicing, these four unwholesome universals really appear. And actually, this third layer of mind is what it's kind of sets the. When we realize we're acting out of this third layer, we may have a high degree of motivation in getting into the more subtler layers of mind. But when we're not practicing, these four unwholesome universals, meaning that they occur together simultaneously, are very much in the driver's seat of our mind. And those four unwholesome universals are delusion. So delusion here is referring to a sense of separate self. And accompanying delusion, simultaneously with delusion, is restlessness. So, you can think about when you're feeling restless, you may be acting from this, or you may want to consider this third layer of mind. When there's restlessness present in your body, delusion is also present there. We're viewing things through a lens of separateness, that there is a me here and then there's you over there. So restlessness is an indicator that there is delusion taking place in the mind. There is also suspension of conscience. In other words, not respecting one's own innate wisdom. So in this particular layer of mind, it's a little bit deeper than the first two. There's not an actual, not even an acknowledgement of one's own innate wisdom. There's not an awareness, really. And so the respect is not even there. The respect can't be there because there's not an awareness of one's own, and that one has the capacity for wisdom, innate wisdom to manifest. And the fourth aspect of this third layer is suspension of respect for others. So there's also not an awareness, maybe another way to say this, there's not an awareness of even the existence of others. You may be in the same room with others, but you're not aware that they actually are there. And so that leads to lack of or suspension of respect. Respect is not there. So these are the four unwholesome universals. They're occurring together simultaneously. When there's restlessness, there's also, you may want to check, what is my degree of respect for the person I'm in the room with right now? Do I see that they're there also with their own feelings, with their own sense of what's right and wrong? Or is that suspended right now? And how about, am I in touch with my own innate wisdom? When there's restlessness in your own mind and body, you could ask yourself, am I in touch with my own innate wisdom? My innate wisdom is here. Am I accessing it or not? Okay, this is the third layer. The fourth layer is also the fourth layer of mind also has to do with unwholesome mental states. And these are not universal, meaning that they don't happen simultaneously at the same time. These 10 unwholesomes are greed, hatred, wrong view, conceit, envy, avarice, worry, and sloth and torpor. I'm not going to go into great detail on these 10 unwholesome particulars, but the main ones are the first two, which are greed and hatred. So greed and hatred both stem from delusion. So the third layer of mind I mentioned, one of the four universals was delusion. So delusion takes place, and out of delusion you'll have either greed, this desire to take, or you'll have hatred, this desire to push away. And according to this model, you cannot have greed and hatred existing in the same mind moment. They can't be there at the same time. It's either one or the other. Now, the next second you might experience, if you're experiencing greed in one moment, the next second you may be experiencing hatred. But they're not happening simultaneously. It's either one or the other. The next 8 that follow greed and hatred are various shades of greed and hatred. So I'll just read to you them once more. Wrong view, conceit, envy, avarice, worry, sloth, and torpor. So, when we're sitting in meditation, or just in your daily life in general, you might notice envy come into your mind. You might notice that you feel envious of what somebody else has that you don't have. That's a kind of an indicator. It's, again, this is envy is part of our mind. Worry is part of our mind. They're indicators for us to consider what seeds are manifesting in our mind in the moment. And it gives, when we're really aware of these unwholesome thought objects in our mind, when we're really aware of them, then we have the capacity to choose whether we want to continue to water those seeds or not water those seeds. So again, this is just part of what makes up the mind. This fourth layer, the 10 unwholesome particulars. Okay, now we're moving into the wholesome aspects of our mind. There's 19 wholesome universals, meaning this fifth layer, these are aspects of our mind that happen simultaneously. There's 19 of them, and they are non-greed, non-hatred, equanimity, conscience, respect, confidence, mindfulness, tranquility, malleability, lightness, wieldiness, proficiency, and rectitude, which means morally correct behavior. Again, without going into great detail on the meanings of each of these 19 wholesome universals, I want you to consider perhaps, what does it feel like when, in your own mind and body, when I just read that list to you? So when I say non-greed, non-hatred, equanimity, conscience, respect, confidence, mindfulness, tranquility. This is one way we water those particular attributes of our mind, just by noticing that they are there. Even if you don't feel them, they're there in our mind on some level, and they're in this fifth level. And when you're sitting in zazen, these, whether we know it or not, these are the seeds that we're watering. These 19 wholesome universals. These are the seeds we're watering. Zen has a particular way about watering them. For example, it's mainly through story. So the Sutra on Mindful Breathing, I think it's somewhat it's bereft of story, but Zen is full of lore. For example, look at the formation called malleability. This kind of maybe another word for that is something that's flexible. Something that's malleable. A malleable mind. And so there's a story about Zen Master Dogen in the 13th century, coming back from China, and his students asking him, Kukai brought back the Shingon teachings. This other teacher brought back the sutras from another school of Buddhism. What did you bring back from China? And the person asking this was expecting to get some kind of a sutra. But what Dogen's response was, in Japanese, nu nan shin. Nu nan shin. Shin means mind or heart, and nu nan means soft and flexible. So this is what he brought back with him from his training in China, a soft and flexible mind. So this is a way of considering, this is our practice. Can we have, as we're sitting in zazen, can we bring to it nu nan shin? Can we bring to it softness, some pliability, some flexibility to our heart and mind? We know when our mind is not malleable, when it's rigid. We might feel it in our heart center. Anger is in it. When anger butts up against when anger is in our mind, in our heart, we could feel. I don't know about you, but when I'm angry, my heart center clenches, and I can feel that. It's palpable. And when I'm not angry, there's this feeling of flow. There's a sense of fluidity in my heart mind. So that's what we are when we're sitting in zazen. That's what we're doing. We are practicing this flow, having a flow, malleability. Like when that flow is there, that mindfulness is already there too. There's equanimity involved. There's non-hatred. There's non-greed. Okay, this is the fifth layer. So we'll move now to the deepest layer here. This is called the wholesome occasionals. Sixth layer, wholesome occasionals, meaning that these wholesome factors of mind may not appear together at the same time. And these six wholesomes are right speech, right action, right livelihood. So these first three are straight out of the Noble Eightfold Path to nirvana. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, compassion, appreciative joy, and wisdom. So those are the sixth. That's what comprises the sixth layer of mind, and it's the deepest layer. And this is also the layer of mind that we're getting in touch with through practice. So you consider how we speak will affect this sixth layer. You know, what we say, what we actually say to each other. Every word out of our mouth has an effect on the universe as a whole. Consider that when speaking. Consider what you say, your tone of voice, how you say it. It all has an effect on those around us. And Dogen there's 3 questions that Dogen suggests we ask ourselves before we speak. One is what we're saying true or not? If it's not true, we may not want to say it. Is it timely? It may be true, but is it a good time to say it or not? You know, so considering the moment, is this the right time to bring this up? And the last thing to consider before speaking is, will it be of benefit to others or not? So it may be true, it may be timely, but is it really of any benefit to others? Does it actually help? Right action. You know, what are we doing? Right livelihood, our livelihood. And then, I love this, appreciative joy. So that means being able to appreciate the joys of others. Others' joy, making others' joy our own joy. Compassion having to do with being able to put ourselves in somebody else's shoe. This is a really hard one for me a lot of times, compassion, especially when I'm in close quarters with others. It's easy to forget to be compassionate. You know, we want to feel good regardless of what others feel around us sometimes. Now I'll just share with you just my own kind of looking at this over the past couple of weeks, or I noticed that, you know, at times, and I'm not always feeling energetic or happy, but when I do feel that way, I don't want anything to hinder it. And so if I meet somebody who is expressing irritability or tiredness, I may see that as a hindrance to my own happiness. That's not compassion. Okay, that's an example of what not to do. So when I'm aware of this, when I'm aware energetically of my own kind of state of mind, if I'm in a good place, then compassion means when I'm meeting somebody who's not in a good space, that I can actually be okay with lowering my energy level. You know, maybe it's okay to tone it down a few notches, to quiet my own mind down, even though I might feel exuberant. So it's that ability. Compassion is that ability to let go of even positive mental states in order to connect with other people. You know. And that connection is, I think, what we're after anyways with practice, the ability to connect on some deeper level with others. Wisdom has to do with seeing emptiness and impermanence. Okay, moving on. So those are the so when we're talking about mind, gladdening the mind, or being aware of the mind, this is how we can become aware of our mind. So maybe I think that's where I'll close for today. We're just moving into this first exercise on getting to know what our mind is, and the potential, the possibilities there for practice. You know, practice is aiming at watering those seeds in our mind on the deepest levels, on those fifth and sixth layers. And I want to close with a quote. Maybe you've heard this. This is from it's apparently a Cherokee legend. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. He says, "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is angry, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win? Which wolf inside of us will win?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed." We feed these two wolves within us with our attention. What do we pay attention to? Do we pay attention to our greed, to our anger, to our delusion? If so, that's the wolf we're feeding. Do we pay attention to our benevolence, empathy, generosity, compassion, confidence? If we focus on those, we're feeding that wolf. Okay, well that is all for today. So I want to thank you all for listening, and we will we'll do more on this the next time around. We'll have to set up a time. Okay.